Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 15 glitch in the matrix and supernatural stories for you. How does it feel when one learns that reality exists as a grid? Case file number 2502, written by Ambitious70. Sunshine, salt air, and a peek behind the curtain. So I live on the central coast of California, with Highway 1 running through parts of the country. We often drive up Highway 1 just to get away for the day, as it's a beautiful drive. On the day this happened, my husband was driving as usual, and we were heading south, so the coastline was just outside my window. It was a sunny, clear day, and I was watching the ocean as we cruised down the highway. We got to a section of the highway that runs completely parallel with the coast, where there are grasslands that separate the ocean from the highway. It was at this point, while looking at the sun glistening off the ocean, that I felt a strong wave of déjà vu, which wasn't too strange, as I have seen that stretch of coast probably 100 times. I glanced away from the window to look at my husband, who was singing to the music and driving. The déjà vu feeling didn't go away, and when I looked back out the window, the coast and grasslands and sky was no longer a singular view. It was split into panels that were being placed to match the speed of the car. What? It was like I was watching a scene, reality, being made, and I wasn't supposed to see it. I looked away at my husband again, and he was absorbed in driving, so I didn't say anything. He usually blows me off when I tell him about my glitches. To this day, I think about that drive often, and wonder what the heck I witnessed. We've driven that stretch many times since, and nothing like that has ever happened. It was beyond unsettling, and changed how I view what we believe is our reality. Indeed, it's what we believe, not what we know. Case file number 2503, written by Remy239, running on Espresso and Broken Time. I work as a restaurant manager. At our establishment, even salary employees have to clock in to record our time. Managers are expected to work 50 hours per week, however that fits is acceptable. Today I came in an hour earlier than scheduled, so I could leave an hour earlier since we were light on covers. Closer to the end of the evening, 8:35 to be exact, I decided to check my time clock to see how much longer I had to stay there on a slow night. I had about an hour and a half left, so right around 10 p.m. I could leave. I got busy with several tasks, running drinks, talking to tables, helping servers with various things, and setting up for brunch service tomorrow. When I decided to check the time again, thinking it would surely be time to head home, my Apple Watch said 8:35. I just stood there for a minute, trying to figure out what the hell happened, and decided I couldn't possibly be going crazy. I checked my phone, and it said 8:36. I was absolutely floored. How could no time have passed while I did at least an hour worth of work? I thought maybe my dumb butt just read my watch wrong, but no. I distinctly recall having a conversation with the server the first time it was 8:35, and how we had seated our last reservation. I even asked them about it, and they couldn't remember. Has this happened to anyone else? Oh yeah, ironically, all the time. Case file number 2504, written by Bid325, The Time I Moved the Wind. Ages 5 to 8. Firmly believed that I had control over the wind to a small degree. I would flex my fingers and visualize becoming a part of the air, and the wind would blow insanely hard. So much so that on most given days I could go out on my skateboard and sail with my hoodie held up, though I stopped doing that or trying after becoming a little older, and realizing that was preposterous. Funny thing is, as a senior in high school playing lacrosse, our field was plagued by a huge swarm of flies. As I imagined with the thaw, many were coming back, and as a joke, I told my friends about my wind powers, and did a fancy twirl of my lacrosse stick and slammed it into the ground. And I kid you not, a big as hell gust of wind on a clear day swept all of the flies away a little further off. Everyone kind of stopped and laughed nervously, and I was like, well, fluck. Age 12. I go to a friend's legit treehouse, like the kind that was legit. She'd built into a 20-foot tree. That I, as careless and clumsy and didn't notice, I was about to step onto the trap door, and next thing I know, I'm falling and hitting my head on branches and ladder rungs, and then clunk headfirst into the ground. I laid there for a couple of seconds and rolled over into dog poop. Great day, right? And I got up like nothing happened besides a little knot on the back of my head. Went to the doctor to be examined and x-rayed, and there was literally nothing wrong, even the bump went down. And if my friend's parents hadn't come to make sure I was alright, and scared my mom would sue them, the doctor most likely would have thought the story was fabricated, looking back. To this day, I have never broken a bone, needed stitches, or been seriously ill. Age 17. Just got my license and a shiny new car, so I'm feeling like any rash teenager would, and speeding a bit. I have my best friend in the car with me. So we're driving around 65 in a 55, and a car slams on brakes ahead of us. I try and brake, but no, I won't make it, as I'm still going about 50. And I try and turn into a McDonald's, and the car goes completely horizontal and keeps sliding over the ramp into the drive-thru and towards a big ditch that separated the McDonald's from the driveway. As we get closer and closer, this is all happening really fast by the way, but I was watching in slow motion in horror. To the divider to the ditch instead of flipping, which we definitely should have done going that fast, completely horizontal and hitting dead on, it just popped over and settled more or less gently into the incline like someone had picked up the car and set it back down. We both looked at each other while my tires popped and my car settled, and were like, Jesus? Yep, Jesus. Since then, nothing really strange has happened, unless I'm not remembering something. I know a lot of that sounds kind of wild, but I promise you, it's all true. Well, I for one believe you. You're like a mixture of Avatar the Airbender and Unbreakable. I forgot the character's name, but Bruce Willis, who just can't be hurt. Pretty cool. Case file number 2505, written by the Pfaffinator, the kiss that came before coffee. I walk my daughter from our house to our school, 4 blocks away, almost every morning, while my wife is getting ready to leave for work. I work from home, and often cross paths with my wife as I'm walking back home, and she is driving to work. We always do a little wave and blow kisses if we see each other. Last Tuesday started completely normally. While I was walking back home after dropping off my daughter at school, I saw my wife, including her purple hair and black work scrubs, driving to work in her car, a gold 2012 Toyota Corolla with a license plate frame of our favorite sports team. So I waved goodbye to her, and she waved back and blew me a kiss goodbye. Then I get back home, and I'm surprised to find her car was still in the garage, and she was still upstairs in our room, getting ready for work. I was understandably freaked out, and I told her what I just experienced. She confirmed that she obviously hadn't left yet that morning. The next day, and we did our usual routine, and I saw her driving off, and she and her car were gone from the house as expected. During lunch, I texted her to confirm that we saw each other on the way to work, and she confirmed that it was her, and she did see me on Wednesday, but not Tuesday. A different universe perhaps, or simply a projected soul, but the latter doesn't really fit, again, because we're talking about projecting an entire car. It was a physical car, not just her soul. So it has to be a different universe, one where she left earlier. Case file number 2506, written by Dread Nova. Trees, toast, and a trail of smoke. My family used to always visit my grandma and aunt when we were little, and it, as kids, would always be an adventure, because we'd wake up at about 5 a.m. because the drive was so long. Anyway, most of the trips are usual, nothing happens. I sleep, we eat breakfast, etc. But this one time, I distinctly remember seeing something extremely weird. I was maybe 8 or 9, I was pretty young. I want to say it was about maybe an hour or so into the trip, since the sun was just peaking, and casting that orange glow against the clouds. I'm in the back seat on the right side of the car. I like to watch the scenery. And I'm watching the streets zoom by like normal. I look up and just above the trees, I kid you not, a burning helicopter is falling about a mile from where we were driving. That's how I explained it to my family. I said I just saw a crashing helicopter and want to see where it landed. We didn't stop because we heard no explosion or any sound of something that had fallen, and we dropped the subject shortly after. To this day, I have no idea what I saw. It definitely could have a logical explanation, but it wasn't a firework because it was something big, hence why I thought it was a helicopter. Case file number 2507, written by Fuzzo45, The Nicotine Poltergeist. This happened when I was about 13 years old. Both my parents worked full-time, so I would get home from school and be alone for an hour or two every weekday. Always pass the time with addicting games, the good times. One day, I'm settling in to start my gaming marathon when I get the strong smell of cigarette smoke, and it kept getting stronger as if someone was in the room, smoking. It got to the point where I had to call my mom and ask if we had anyone come in to do work on the house, or had anyone who smoked inside. She assured me no one would have been in the house all day, and reminded me that we had a strict non-smoking home. Despite this, the smell would not fade, but I just kept on playing my games. Then, I hear what sounds like someone walking on the carpet, but not picking up their feet all the way, like my dad. So I wheel back into my chair to look upstairs, had a clear view from my computer room, and surprise, surprise, no one is there. But I do hear whispers, what sounds like a small child, and then an adult whispered sternly, "No." Q running to the kitchen with a knife and hiding in the bathroom till my mom gets home. I tell her all about what happened after I called her. She tells me that it was weird, but nothing to worry about, just a neighbor smoking by her window. And I probably just heard them talking outside. Now, a few years later, I'm telling this story at a family gathering, and my mom comes clean that the night before all this happened, she had a dream of my grandfather, who died of lung cancer before I was born, walking around our house and checking up on my sisters and I while we slept. She didn't tell me originally, as to save me from getting creeped out. I don't think that's creepy. It's, sad about the cancer, of course, but rather wholesome. Case file number 2508, written by Insidious Fox. Skipping stones or skipping stars? Summertime, at a secluded beach at night, stargazing. Very low light pollution, no clouds, no moon, simply the clearest, crispest night sky I've ever seen. For the first time I can remember, finally seeing the Milky Way with my naked eyes. Like a faintly luminous, hazy cloud stretched from one point on the horizon, arcing overhead, and to the opposite side of the horizon. A field of countless stars and planets in view. Frequent sightings of meteors from the Perseid shower. Occasional sighting of extremely faint, barely visible, steady moving lights across the sky, like extremely faint stars, what I can only imagine were satellites. In short, utterly amazing, awe-inspiring. And we sat on the beach to the sound of softly crashing waves for close to 2 hours, taking it all in, totally awestruck. Gazing up into the stars, waiting for the next fast and brief meteor streak, I saw something strange. A pale orange orb of light softly flashed into existence to the left of my focal point, about 4 to 5 times the size of an average star, and as I turned to see, it was already silently fading into nothing, seemingly in the same spot it appeared. Maybe 2 to 3 seconds later, the orb appeared again to the right of where it first was, a distance of about 10% of my field of view of the night sky, and it faded again as it slowly moved. And once more, about 2 seconds later, it appeared again about the same distance away from the last spot, and in seemingly a straight line trajectory to the 2 previous spots, before vanishing again, this time for good. Each time it appeared, it was like it was moving slower than it must have been moving during each disappearance, to cover the distances it was covering. Not saying it's anything truly unexplainable, but definitely unlike anything I've ever seen, and unlike anything in the sky that night. My best guess is a meteor skipping across the atmosphere, but there were no sparks, no trail, and it was so much slower than any meteor I've ever seen. Case file number 2509, written by Slady Bits, the silent bus, the loud relationship, and me in the middle. I was contemplating breaking up with my boyfriend. He doesn't communicate. When I should break up with him, how should I break up with him? I was in traffic going home behind a charter bus. There was no license plate, which I thought was odd. I was behind this bus for 2 lights prior to the tunnel. I remember thinking that I would just stay behind the bus the entire way through the tunnel and not speed in the left-hand lane like all the other cars. It was a white, unmarked bus with what looked like 5 bike racks vertically across the back. I decided to stay in my lane. I looked over at the other lane and saw all the speeding trucks and an orange concrete truck zipping along past in the left lane. I looked back to my lane. The bus was gone. The bus had vanished. It was not in front of me, and it was not behind me. It was just gone. The tunnel goes uphill, going northbound as we were leaving it. You can see vehicles a quarter of a mile ahead. No bus. I looked behind my car from the top where you can see vehicles exiting the tunnel. There was no bus. I pulled my car over on the way home and processed what I just experienced. Both my ears were ringing. The silence was deafening. Maybe my boyfriend isn't so bad? Maybe I should stick with it? Silent roaring in my ears, then peaceful calm. Where could that bus have possibly gone? I was behind that bus and then I instantly wasn't. Reality has seemed strange all day. What is the deal with that? It could be quantum immortality, where you got into an accident, you don't remember the accident. Some people do, some people don't. Probably down to memory suppression of the new host body. And your soul is just in a different copy of yourself, and voila. Different universe, slightly different. Hey, maybe in this universe your boyfriend talks more. One can hope. Case file number 2510, written by Windtire Frost. The Big Rig That Blinked Out of Reality. I was driving back from Colorado to Texas with my wife in the seat next to me, and my youngest son asleep in the back. It was very late and I was very tired. I zoned out in thought and was not paying attention to the road ahead of me. Suddenly I snapped back into full awareness and saw that my lane, the left-hand lane of the highway, was coming to an end, and there, not far in front of us, there were several pylons blocking off my lane. I only had a few seconds to move to the right, and I shot a glance to the right to see if it was clear. It wasn't. There was an 18-wheeler semi to the right of me. Its cab about parallel with the rear seat and trunk of my car. I think it was the sound of it that snapped me out of my daze. I was doing about 65 miles per hour, and my options were to slam the brakes and plow directly into the pylons and whatever was beyond them, couldn't see, or pray there was room to move to the right, and maybe the truck driver would see my predicament and hit his brakes or move over as quickly as he could. I let my foot off the gas and edged quickly to the right so I could miss the pylons ahead and hopefully not lose control of the car. It still swerved a bit, but we made it. I turned my head to the right, and there was no semi to be found anywhere. Nobody was near us. I looked over at my wife and she was white as a sheet. I asked her if she saw the semi and she nodded and said it had been right there beside us when I turned into that lane. She turned around and looked everywhere behind us. No semi anywhere, no wreck. Some people farther back were continuing down the highway like normal. People on the other side were just continuing as normal. It's like it just winked out of existence. Yeah, so back to back, quantum immortality. I think the last few lines really point to that, where everyone was reacting like nothing happened, because in their universe nothing did. One question I always ask myself though about quantum immortality, where the soul jumps to a different universe, if you die with your loved ones at the same time with them, do they jump over to the same new universe as you did? Or are you dealing with the copies, so-called copies of them that were already in that universe, and the originating ones that you know, your wife and child, are in a different version, in a different universe? There's really no way to tell. Well, if you all remember the same event, I guess actually, yeah, you can tell. It seems like if death occurs at the same time, there's a priority to transition you all to the same new universe, which makes sense. Case file number 2511, written by Anonymous. When the Grim Reaper sends a textbook reminder. Quick explanatory note. My bedroom in this house was in the basement, and the stairs leading to the main floor had a landing halfway up. There was a railing around the top of the stairs, so you could see over the railing to the bottom of the stairs. Last year I had a dream I walked out of my bedroom and looked over to the stairs and saw what I can only best describe as death incarnate standing on the bottom step. I don't remember specifically what it looked like, but what I remember is the dread I felt, and I immediately woke up completely freaked out. A week later, I was going somewhere, walked out of my bedroom, went to put my foot at the first step, and about half a second before my foot would have hit the first step, a heavy bag drops down from the railing above and just barely nicks my leg. My younger brother had dropped his school bag over the railing, too lazy to walk it down. It was full of textbooks, and there is an honest chance that if I had been directly under it, that it would have killed me. If I had been half a second sooner, I could have died. The can't explain part is a dream, of course. My initial reaction was to rip into my brother, and then about a split second later I remembered the dream. My brother was a little freaked out by how close a call it was, and I was freaked out more by the connection to the dream than the actual incident itself. The nice thing is, I'd happened to tell some friends about the dream, so when I explained the bag dropping, they didn't think I was making up the dream. Case file number 2512, written by a white 407, Snow Tracks and Sky Fire. When I was about 16, I would wake up in the middle of the night for no reason. I would usually go downstairs and watch TV until I fell back asleep. Well, one night, I woke up at about 3 a.m., went downstairs and into the kitchen for a glass of milk. I go into the living room and I saw two extremely odd things. My parents live in an old farmhouse with the nearest neighbor being about 3 miles away. Anyway, I sit on the couch and just so happen to look out the window, and, being the middle of winter, you can kind of see deer and coyote figures walking in the snow. I see this human-like figure walking straight up a hill until out of sight. I shrug it off thinking my mind is playing tricks on me, as I'm extremely tired. Well, fast forward about 30 minutes and a super bright orange and yellow light lights up the sky, and I see 4 massive fireball-like orbs shoot across the sky, headed right for the top of the hill the figure was walking up. All the orbs were exactly the same size and traveling exactly at the same speed, with the same distance between them, one after the other. I'm freaked out, so I go and grab my weapon, as if it would do much against aliens, and set it right next to the couch. I stared out the window for about an hour until I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I go outside to look for footprints in the snow, and saw some faint print almost like a bird's foot, but human-sized. It was snowing pretty hard that morning, so they didn't stay around for too long. Weirdest experience ever. Case file number 2513, written by Green for Life. Interior design by Ghost Committee. When I was about 12 years old, my mother and I were doing house chores. She was doing the laundry, and we were walking back and forth through the house. It was an older house with a sort of division between 2 sides, hot dog style, through the elongated house. The separation was caused by a staircase going up to the attic. While going back and forth between spaces, my mom decided she wanted to rearrange the den and living area. It's an oddly arranged home. I helped her move our large sectional sofa, heavy glass and wood dining room table, and coffee table into a different configuration. We proceeded on our own with our chores on the other side of the house for 30 seconds. Came back in, everything was back the way it was before. We moved everything again where we wanted it. We aren't easily spooked. And then went about our chores again. Again, about 30 seconds or less later, the furniture was back the way it was. One last time we moved it into the configuration we wanted, and went to the other side of the house and came back, still not much time in between. The sectional sofa was spread throughout the space like someone pushed it to the perimeter of the wall, in all directions, and the heavy dining room chairs were stacked on top of the table. We moved everything back how it originally was, and nothing moved after that. Weird. No one else was in the house with us. We heard no sounds, and the house had no insulation. So generally speaking, we tended to hear what was going on the other end of the house. Not this time. My mother and I both reminisce about this and how strange it was. This was about 20 years ago. Honestly, the most spectacular thing about this story is just how nonchalant you and your mother both were. I would be getting out of Dodge after the first instance of that happening. Furniture rearranging, and you didn't even hear it. That's even more incredible. Case file number 2514, written by Anna S. Green. Salt, static, and signs from the other side. My younger sister passed away 3.5 years ago, very suddenly. Shortly after she passed, I ended up getting a new job where me and 3 other women answered the same phones. The voicemails for the phones were generic, and we switched phones daily and never left our names, just the office name. So any one of us could answer and speak to the person on the other end. It was a brand new job, and I didn't even have the phone numbers memorized. There was a store near my new place of employment that sold Himalayan salt rock lamps, the new age sort of stuff. A few weeks after starting the job, I walked into the store and was looking at the lamps. My sister was obsessed with pink Himalayan salt before her accident, and was using a lot in cooking and baking. Looking at the lamps pulled at my heart and made me think of her, and I debated getting one. I decided I would get one another day because I had to catch the bus home, and didn't want to carry it. The next morning at work, one of my coworkers picks up a voicemail on one of the phones we all use. She turns to me and asks if I gave the phone number out at the furniture liquidation store, because they left a message for me. I was confused because A, I had not been in a furniture liquidation store, would not give out a work number I share out for such a purpose. I listened to the voicemail, and it is some woman saying, "Hi, this is Jill from Furniture Liquidation Store. This message is for Anna S. Green. Your salt rock lamp is in. Please call me back to arrange a time for a pickup." Let's just say my coworkers and I were completely stunned when I explained the significance, and went back to the New Age store that afternoon to buy the lamp. There have been so many bizarre occurrences like this since my sister's passing, but that one sticks out. The lamp sits in my living room, and I think of her every time I turn it on. Case file number 2515, written by Otaku Doodles. Mondays are weird, but this was next level. I was a sophomore in college. Nothing special about me. I was running late for my 9 a.m. history class because I overslept. I sprinted across campus, barely making it to the right building before class started. I was already flustered and rushing, so I wasn't exactly taking in every detail around me. I get to the usual classroom, room 204, second floor. I've been there every Monday all semester. I open the door expecting to see my professor mid-sentence, and a bunch of annoyed classmates turning to look at me. But that's not what I saw. The room was wrong. It wasn't a classroom. It was a dim, dusty storage room, like really old stuff. Outdated film projectors, ancient monitors, stacks of old VHS tapes, even a busted television. The air was stale and smelled like something that hasn't been touched in decades. I stood there for a second, thinking maybe I had the wrong room or the wrong floor, but I knew I was in the right place. Feeling really confused, I stepped back out into the hallway and saw another student walking by. I asked him if they knew where the history class was supposed to take place. He gave me a weird look and pointed at the same door I had just come out of. I turned around, slightly nervous, and opened the door again. This time, it was a normal classroom. Bright lights, desks, students chatting, professor at the front writing on the board, like nothing had ever been different. No trace of dust, no old equipment, no weird smell. I just stood there for a second, stunned. Nobody looked at me funny. No one else seemed to have noticed anything weird. I walked to my usual seat and sat down like nothing had happened. I started pulling out my notebook and textbook, but couldn't focus at all during the lecture. I don't know what I saw. Maybe I hallucinated? Maybe I was still half asleep. But it felt real. It smelled real. I could smell the dust in that room. I could feel how still and heavy the air was. It wasn't a dream. I'm not sure what to make of it, but it definitely left me rattled. This reminds me of the scene in Harry Potter with the Room of Requirement, and Filch, and this little gang of miscreants were rushing the door, and of course it opens just the storage room. So I guess your school has a room of requirement too. Pretty cool. Case file number 2516, written by Anonymous. Third person grief, first person loss. One night, I had a very lucid dream that rocked me to my core. My brother and I shared the same circle of friends for the most part. As we grew into our teen years, we spent our summer days hanging out at whoever's house that would put up with us, and our summer nights were filled with fishing and killing time outdoors. I had a nice truck and a little cash on hand most of the time. This afforded me friends that had no ride and little cash. If there were ever good old days, they were it for my brother and I. My brother Matt became close to one particular friend, I'll call him Joe, as they were close in age and interests. Joe spent more time around the house than the other friends, and soon enough, he began to stay the night as my brother's guest. Joe was close to our family, and by default, he became close to me, as he stayed the night often. Despite Joe's odd ways, he was a likable guy and was fun to have around. Years blew by as I graduated high school, worked my jobs, and began to date my now wife. Joe's appearances around the house faded as he worked jobs and began to date. Interests change, friendships fade, and we lose touch, I guess. My wife and I married on a clear, crisp day in the month of September in 1997. It seemed like everything was new back then. So many changes in the years 1997 and 98. New apartment, new jobs, new friends, new living arrangements, dreams and ambitions. Together, my wife and I had so much zeal for what the future held. Those were the good old days all over again. My wife and I forged life together in a little townhouse, situated in a little railroad town. At night, you could smell the heavy odor of diesel fuel that fueled the trains. We got used to the hisses of compressed air being released out of the air brakes, continually throughout the night. My wife and I had a life to build, and we were happy to do it right there, next to the railroad yard. I remember we had an L-shaped sectional sofa that we bought from a local outlet store. It was tan and avocado green striped. It was very casual in style and texture. Its texture was a little smoother than burlap. It didn't match anything else in the apartment, but it was cheap, so we bought it. The night it happened was a Friday night, and into the early hours of Saturday morning. My wife and I went to bed before midnight in our second-floor bedroom, not knowing what the next few hours held for us and our circle of friends from the past. Peacefully I slept, unaware of the life-changing events that were unraveling in the city nearby. It was as though I was teleported from my place of rest to my sparsely furnished living room. My view was very vivid and memorable. There I was, viewing myself sitting on the end of that sectional, crouched over, elbows on knees, head in hands, whispering a prayer. My perspective was third person, but the emotions I wrestled with were very much first person. I remember going through a procession of thoughts and feelings. It began with shock and disbelief, which faded to bargaining. In this nocturnal cinema, I began to remember the life and interactions of a character with no name or face. The realization that somebody had died began to settle on me, and now I was going through a grieving process. The sound of my phone, gonging next to my head, called me back from my place of melancholy and observance, and once again into my warm, comfortable bed, still trying to deal with the emotions that night's vision left me with. I fumbled with the phone, answering to the voice of my brother. It's amazing what life-altering info can be shared over a 2-minute phone call. My brother struggled to tell me that our mutual friend Joe had been ended by a drunk driver only a few hours before. Joe was driving through an intersection and was broadsided by a drunk, who failed to stop at the stop sign. The details of what happened relayed to me over the phone separated me from the memories of the dream. Out of bed, down the stairs, and into the sectional I went. As I sat at the end of that sectional trying to process the horrible news, I entered a procession of emotion. Shock and disbelief, bargaining with God for a life snuffed out. Memories of Joe flooded my mind, and finally a whispered prayer seeking comfort. Grief gave way to wonderment when I recalled the dream. It was as though the final step, a word of prayer, sparked off an instantly gratifying moment of déjà vu. I could recall when I lived this moment the first time. Was it a premonition? Was it a coincidence? I don't know. What I do know is, I can't control it or make it happen. I'm not sure I've ever repeated this seemingly prophetic feat. For those still with me, 19 years later, my wife and I now have 2 children, ages 14 and 17. We're still happily married. We still have a zeal for what the future holds. My brother eventually married the girl that Joe was with at the time of his death, and they now have 3 beautiful children. Life moves on and fate is an amazing thing. Sometimes we get the opportunity to peek into it and see what it has in store. What a beautifully written story, even though the subject is so sad in many ways. Bittersweet, I guess you could say. Your mind created the scene in a dream based on information that your subconscious had gained. Now, how did your subconscious gain that knowledge? I don't know. I really don't. But to experience it would be something else entirely. Can't be quite conveyed just through words because of the emotional impact. You already had to live it to know it fully. But thanks for sharing it. Now time for the jokes of the day. What has 4 letters, sometimes has 9 letters, but never has 5 letters? This is more of a puzzle than a joke. I just spent $600 on a limo rental, but forgot to hire a driver. All that money and nothing to show for it. PSA: if you're ever assaulted by a knight or a bishop, you need to get to a hospital immediately. Chest pains are a medical emergency. I like that one. I went to McDonald's today. I smiled at the bloke and said, "Can I have a small shake, please?" He told me to frick off and walked out of the men's toilets. Me: where are we going? Dad: to get our new glasses. Me: then what? Dad: we'll see. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony, signing off.